Hello and welcome back. Before we head off for lunch, and remember you're back at 2 o'clock after lunch, we're joined now by, I still want to call them my APS Heroes panel, or our legends, and we're joined today by our panel of experts. We have John Nielsen with us. John will be well known to many of you who work and practice in the Northeast, where John has been a professional mostly in the civil engineering field for, I think almost 40 years now, isn't it, John? He has been very active with both the Construction Industry Council and Constructing Excellence in the Northeast, and he is on the advisory board at Northumbria University, where he helps there with their civil engineering degrees. I think he's got a little bit more he's going to be telling us about later about the apprentice degree in civil engineering that he's been instrumental in helping get off the ground there. And we have got Fran Watkins-White. Now, Fran will be, I hope, quite well known to most of you. Fran is one of our 2 regional representatives in Central England, and she's there with Alan Fowler. But she is also the head of CDM services for Bureau Veritas UK. And she's got over 15 years experience providing proactive CDM advice and support to clients across the country. We've also got Ceri Camilleri. Now, Ceri has come to construction by a slightly different route to most of you. Ceri has come as a professional educator. She had a long career in primary education and has moved since earlier in the 2000s to working with her husband at Camilleri Consulting based in Cardiff. Ceri is one of our board directors, and she also chairs our Education and Training Committee. So if you've got any thoughts about what we should be doing, what we should be doing more of, get in touch with Ceri and we'll see how we can manage to get that built into a more structured programme of education and training for APS members. And lastly, but by no means least, we have Mark Snelling, who is our President-elect. Mark is also our go-to guy on the Building Safety Act, where he has been instrumental in trying to make the secondary regulations flowing from the Building Safety Act workable and usable. He is also, however, a founder member of the Building Safety Alliance, where APS is one of the founder members. So those are our panel members today. So, panel, we've been taking some questions in from people, and with permission, I'm going to park some of the BSA ones and actually refer people back to our own webinar series on that, where you will see Mark and Andrew as part of our occasional series looking at all of the regulations and the new things as the secondary regulations become clearer on the Building Safety Act. Your technical questions we'll do a Q&A on, but I would strongly recommend, if you haven't caught up with our webinars on the BSA, that's the place to start. You'll find them on the website. Go into the events section, you'll find them all there. You can catch up. If you're a member of APS, there is no additional charge for those and won't be any charge for the ones that are coming up.
I think we've got another one next week, Lesley, haven't we?
Yes, I was going to say you've got another one coming up, haven't you, Mark? And there's stuff there for our members who are non-English members. I know the BSA sometimes are people from the other 4 nations feel it's a bit sort of England heavy because the Act of Parliament is, but rest assured we're having a look at how that plays out across the devolved administrations as well. So without further ado, let's have a think about some of the questions that have come in to us this morning. There's been quite a lot of interest in what we've been saying about recruitment. And I know you were all talking in the green room before this started about your own thoughts about recruitment. So I'd like to pick up on some of those just now. You were all saying that it's all very well trying to speak to people maybe at university level. John was saying that how he was a bit concerned that we seem only to be managing to talk to men, and that the elephant in the room was the fact that we weren't managing to attract more women into the construction sector. I would like to maybe start by asking John, what did you mean by that, and where do you think we're going wrong with recruitment?
Thanks, Leslie. And actually, can I just give a quick plug to Mark's and your the building standards webinars? They've been great, and I really would highly advise anybody to look at them. We pass them around the staff as well. They're good. They're really good. With regards to recruitment within the industry, as far as I can see, has been an issue for years. I've been a Nations and Regions champion at CIC and on their board, and we were discussing it over 20 years ago, with the aspect being, how does the industry look? And the industry does not look very good. We've had a few instances where it doesn't particularly look very good, particularly Grenfell, where frankly we looked appalling when you looked at it from the outside. But for me, the major issue is that we simply don't have enough female people within the industry. We have, I think it was mentioned before, something like 6 to 14%. And that, for when there's 50% in the population, that says to me, okay, I've got a huge section there that I'm not actually getting to. When it becomes an issue for recruitment, say for us, is that we don't necessarily look at degrees. That's the first thing. We look at the person. We look at how they will fit in the future, which I think was mentioned by some of the speakers before. How does that person fit in? What are you offering them as an overall? I have to say cash, unfortunately, is still a bottom line here. And if you went in and said, oh, this is all great, and then you give them something that was below their expectations, you're on your ear. So I think the aspect here is in recruitment for yourselves is to definitely have a look. I think we have to start looking at taking people younger and taking them to the future. We've moved away as my firm. My firm is a civil engineering and structural firm, which does health and safety as well. So we do a lot of design. We are 17. We at the moment have 3 apprenticeship degrees, people in there. We have 2 youngsters as well, taking them through. We decided about 4 or 5 years ago, the way forward here was to take youngsters and start developing them, because we were constantly having a problem in trying to get staff. We found this way very good. The worry is exactly as Leslie has mentioned previously, and has been mentioned previously, a recruitment agent bloody wades on in and nicks them, tries to get something else. Been in my life, recruitment agencies, I don't know if there's anybody here, but I'll be honest with you, I hate them. They cause me grief.
What do you you get somebody trained up and then somebody just pinches them?
Leslie, I was talking to the manager of one of them when we were doing I'll have to be careful, I suppose, what I say, when we were doing an awards judging panel. And while I was doing that and he was asking me about business, one of his colleagues was just openly tapping up one of our youngsters, in which they passed the emails on to me. I mean, what are you saying, do? So that is an issue. So I think the way we felt with it is to try and take the young person forward, show belief in them, show them, because as mentioned before by other people, there are stacks of jobs within the industry that are varied and different. We need people that are hands-on, definitely do, but we need people in the office. We need people that don't necessarily think, oh God, I want to be the boss of all of this at the end of it. However, they want to learn the technical aspects of how you do that. That's interesting. A good point mentioned before that we often find is, look what you've been involved in. Come on, let's have a look at this building and what you've been involved in, what you've built. That is always the eye-opener for youngsters when they see that. And they see that, right, this is an industry to be involved in.
Ceri, you were saying that you've recently been talking to a group of Year 7 girls and boys about careers in construction. How old are Year 7s again?
So my daughter's actually just started in year 7, so I know the answer to that one. 11 and 12.
So what did you find when you talked to them? Was it a real eye-opener for them that there were exciting jobs there?
Yeah, it actually, in this instance, it was 120 year 7 girls only. So to just gauge, as they came in to the careers day, purely on construction careers, they had to indicate how they felt about a career in construction. And I think there's only about 4 or 5 girls out of 120 who actually said they definitely wanted to go into a career in construction. And after all the activities that we did throughout the day, breaking down all the kinds of stigma that's around construction, educating them, informing them that there's like 183 different career opportunities in construction. It's not just about bricklaying, even though that's a really good skill to have at the moment because it's very well remunerated. When we explained to them, it was more than just on-site workers, that, like you say, there's all kinds of design opportunities and management opportunities on-site, off-site. We targeted lots of stigmas around, construction sites are always dirty and smelly and very unsafe. And it's like, well, it doesn't have to be. It's really year 7 could almost be too late. I think, there's statistics out there saying that children between the ages of 5 and 7 have already made up their minds that they definitely don't want to go into construction. Perhaps parents are just saying it's not a great opportunity to go in. So it's actually just, raising an awareness about what good opportunities there are in the construction industry.
Yes.
And getting to younger children. I mean, having been a primary school teacher, you have role play areas. So you might have a pizzeria one week and a construction site the next. And instead of just putting a couple of little foam bricks there and a hard hat, getting into schools, primary schools, secondary schools, to help support the construction industry and potential of careers within that industry. It's about resources as well, obviously.
Fran, you were saying that you still find that people look at you a bit askance when you say that you work in construction. And what do you do? What do you say to them when they look at you like?
Yeah, and I spend a lot of time with sort of young people through the volunteering I do, and you kind of, it's almost, I think, reflects on what Ceri was saying, actually. It's that bit around how you change that image. So I'm not talking about sticking site boots on and getting covered, although I do get covered in mud and whatever else you might have to. It's about talking to them about their perceptions. It's a career that involves a massive skill set, interpersonal skills, communicate, all of the stuff around communication, problem solving, all the stuff that when you break it down into the bits that can appeal to people, they go, oh, I could do that. But it's that mindset, as Ceri says, if we've got no role models, if we've got nothing at 3, 4, 5 that's saying, hang on a minute, this is something that could be interesting for me. I'll be driving a digger just because she's a recent, example. But where's the examples? And we need to, we can all be part of creating that. But I think, as you say, it's trying to sell people something that isn't their perception, which is somebody standing on a site in the freezing cold and the rat, which we all have to do. But all the things around it that actually make it a really valuable career and a real rewarding career.
Yes. Mark, you see a lot of people across the industry. You'll have thoughts about what it is that puts people off. Or maybe even attracts them.
Well, it's interesting. If you look back on, I've run my own business since, I think, 95 now. And similarly, like John, I couldn't afford to employ ready trained people. And I've trained up a variety of people from, I've trained up 3 administrators into being to technical professionalism because they were involved in the business. They started could see what it was all about. One of them runs her own company now. One one did drop out. So I had one failure that she decided she didn't want to do anymore. Another one went on to work for a much larger organisation. In fact, everybody I've worked on has gone on to work for large organisations, and now one is European Safety Director for a pharmaceutical company. And I don't mind that they've moved on. I've trained them up, and then moved on with the next one. And I think it's in a way, for me, it's always been at a macro level. It's always been down as I've got to survive in business. I can't afford to buy people that have come out of university. Can't afford to pay their fees. So I'll find people, I'll enthuse them, and I'll bring them on and train them up. And it's been successful, and they've been successful, and they still like me, and I still talk to them. So I must have done something right.
Yes. Before we go on to one or two questions that people have got about RAC and the current problems that they're having with the cement that's being used in the schools, one or two people have asked, let's see, we've had Elspeth and Victoria and Alan have asked us about the occupation codes. If you want to find out what occupation codes there are, they relate to the government's list of people who are allowed into the country. If you just Google occupation codes UK, the government paper that sets out what the occupation codes are, what occupations they are, and then they break down examples of what jobs there might be in those groups. If you just Google them, they're all on the gov.uk website, so you'll find all of the details there. They're all round about 5,300 and something are the numbers, the ones that relate to construction. There's quite a list of them, and they range from things like bricklayers and plasterers, which our friends from the Federation for Master Builders recently managed to get onto that list. But there are other things there, like site supervisors. So you could probably tweak what you wanted, but you do have to be able to the employer has to guarantee the place, but there are ways in doing it. But that's where you find the information. Go on the gov.uk website and just have a look for occupation codes. It all comes up there. So on to RAC. We've been asked by Tim, and let's see what other ones we've got here. We've got Jeffrey and Tim again have been asking about RAC, and the question that Tim has put is around whether or not more could have been done to identify the problems and to rectify the problems earlier. If we had just looked to do this under CDM 2015 and the duty of the surveyor under those regulations. Mark, you're a great expert on this. What do you think about that? Do you think more could have been done earlier if we'd used existing legislation?
I have to say it's as a particular problem and a problem that needs immediate action. I think it's snuck up on many people from behind. I think there are people that were aware of it, but at what point do you, with any of these things, at what point do you act upon it? Certainly from the occupational sector, which I've been rapidly communicating with this morning. Higher risk buildings need to consider structural safety now, and have all been starting to look. And I've only seen one this morning with a possible RAC problem. I think schools seems to be a particular because it was used in that, and there are a lot of schools that knew about it. But at what point does any risk become intolerable, doesn't it? And that's what it is. I think a lot of people have known about it, and at what point? And we deal, APS, risk at our core, isn't it? At what point is something no longer tolerable? And and I'm glad it's happened before somebody's died. And I suppose that's all you can say. Somebody went before something collapsed and hurt somebody. Went, actually, we can no longer tolerate this risk. We'll deal with it.
I remember, John, when you were on the board, discussions that you had then around about what is acceptable risk, because you can't, cost goes through the roof if you try to mitigate every risk out there. Do you think more could have been done about this in advance?
Do you know? I don't think so, Lesley. I think it's exactly as Mark says. It's been known it was there. If you think about it, this is a material that was required by the industry in a response to a client who said, "I need more buildings to be built. I need them quick, and yeah, they might just be temporary. I need them cheaper. Thank you." And industry responded and gave it to them. But they've never built in the risk of that from the start. There's an inherent maintenance issue that is there. Now, CDM now hopefully will pick that up, that if somebody comes to us with a new material, we would say, right, that's fine, that's great, you want to use that. When have I got to look at this? Is there any problems? Is it going to last a lifetime? So I think that sort of thing is in there. So I think the regs now would pick something up, but I think then probably it just all slipped by. After all, the regs in the end were a response, and they gave us a health and safety file and tried to give proper O&Ms because they weren't there. And now we're seeing that's the problem. So I'm not too sure if it could have been picked up. And I totally agree with Mark. It's good. It's picked up now. I think we have to understand it's going to be reasonably big. God, we're in my office out of nowhere. Suddenly, tons of people come down. Have I got it? Well, I don't bloody know if you've got it or not within your building. But I think you've got to be a bit careful, because I think we're on a bit of a hiding after Grenfell. Let's just be aware that what industry did was what we were required to do. The people who manage the buildings have not looked after their buildings and have not assessed, well, we did use that material then, they did tell us it was lasted 20, 30 years or whatever, so we would have to do something. That isn't necessarily our issue, that is the management of the buildings, the management of the stock issue.
Fran, do you think this is going to be keeping you busy for a while?
I suspect, yeah, we've got involved in quite a lot of education work over time. So I suspect we'll, as people start working to remediate or replace buildings, then I think us and a lot of consultants that get involved with the Department for Education will get called on to support, potentially as well with the other side of our business in terms of the risk assessment and the structural side as well. So yeah, we could be. It seems we go around in circles with school projects, that sort of, you get a rock of a government initiative, don't you, that throws a lot of money, and then you can almost see another circle coming for the whole industry. So, yeah.
Ceri, is it a problem in Wales? Do you know?
Yeah. Obviously the list has only just recently been released, so I haven't had a look yet to see if there are any specific areas in Wales. I do agree with what everybody said so far. It's very hard to get schools maintained well. Again, it all comes down to school budgets, and head teachers now run those school budgets, so they're not building experts. They might not necessarily know what's dangerous and what isn't. And also, again, it's much bigger than just this issue. I mean, there's that many schools that have got asbestos within the buildings. I know recently, unfortunately, of a head teacher who passed away because she'd worked in a school with asbestos for so many years. So again, it comes down to obviously public budgets, and the people who are managing these premises, do they know what they're looking for? Do they know what the dangers are? And I would guess a very high percentage, no, they don't.
I smiled when John said, client said we only want it for a short time. I can remember a public sector client saying to the project team, "Oh, we only want this for 10 years." And the project, as soon as the client walked out the room, we went, "Don't believe him. We'll design it for longer."
Yeah.
Actually, I think that feeds in a little bit to what Chris has asked, and about whether or not you all think that there's maybe a role for the old style clerk of works still.
Absolutely, yeah. I think having that hands-on, on-site, day-to-day presence to actually see what's being built and bring, and a good clerk of works has that knowledge and experience to actually, we're talking about workmanship, weren't we, on the last presentation, and to actually be able to see standing on site that the standards are being maintained is actually fundamental, because there's so much when you go on site and you walk around with even a site manager who's regularly walking around that site and say, does that look right? And because they're not there 100% of the day watching what everybody's doing, you almost need that overlay of another layer of standards.
Do you all agree with that?
Yes, 100% they're required. I think the problem we've got is whether we have them. And I think we've just gradually let people who reach an age, who maybe have been involved in trades, whatever, and we've let them drift away instead of this is exactly where they could be of such use on the
standard
site.
Knowledge,
and that would be really good. I have to say, as a designer, and this is something that we have had also when cladding manufacturers have come in and spoke to us, I think I would struggle to find a job where if I went on the site, what is on my last construction issue drawn is what's been built. And that's still a major problem.
So there's some interesting stuff coming out. I'll talk about it next week in detail, but it's there's some modifications to what was being proposed in the Building Safety Act that I think is going to mean that clerk of works clerk of works will become the norm. Some of the things that duty holders are required to sign will mean that they can't really sign them unless somebody's checking on their behalf.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the fact that the golden thread will be extended through the use of the building will have some effect on maybe making buildings in use safer, rather than just, sort of there being almost that sort of drop dead point at which you hand the building over to your client or whoever's going to be using it and you just say bye-bye? Do you think actually extending that thread through will address some of John's issue about the fact that you turn up and the drawings don't bear any resemblance to the building that you've actually got on the ground? Mark?
It's interesting. What we thought the golden thread was going to be, I think, is going to look slightly different. But yes, it's this. There's a lot of the thing that I think is going to make the difference is the people needing to sign on the line saying, I believe this, to the best of my knowledge, this building was built as it should have been, or this was designed as it should have been. I think it's that's going to force the change more than the golden thread. Although the golden thread will need to be accurate. Well, but the golden thread only relates to high-risk buildings, and I think some of if the civil liability in section 38 of the building, I still can't work out whether it has been enacted. I don't think it has been, of the Building Act 1984. If that civil liability comes in or has come in, I still can't work it out.
I don't think it has, actually.
No, I don't think it has from what I can find this morning. If that comes in, that really changes. The golden thread will be in effect required on everything, because you will need to provide assurance to protect your own interest going out for quite a considerable period of time. So I think the golden thread is bigger than, I know it's only HRB high risk buildings, but I think it'll. You think the world is changing
beyond that? Do you think that will address your issue, John?
I think exactly as Mark said about signing something. As soon as you get people to have to sign something to say, look, this is it, then they've nailed their colours to the mast, and that becomes the sort of guiding factor. I think that's where it'll definitely improve.
Have you been finding, Fran, that your clients have been becoming a bit more frantic about the use stage of a building rather than just the build stage?
I think some it has. I think there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of raising awareness of responsibilities and what's actually required of people, because I think it's still, we've seen a flurry probably the last few months in the architects and the other people we work with suddenly putting their head above the parapet and go, oh, that's happening. But I think for the knock-on effect down to the end users and the clients, I think there's still a bit of work to be done in terms of the industry and ourselves raising some awareness. Obviously, we do a lot of ongoing safety support for clients, and raising that awareness that this is what you need to do, these are your responsibilities. And I think that's going to be an ongoing journey over the next few months to make sure people are aware and taking those responsibilities seriously, so that it doesn't become another thing that only gets on people's radars when the prosecutions start happening. It's really got to be done before then. And I think there's a lot of work still with buildings that are at design stage to make sure that they're being shaped in the right way, that golden threads and things can be carried through. So.
Ceri, you're an auditor, aren't you, for standards? Are you seeing people making a greater effort to make sure that what they are doing is compliant?
Yes, I would say generally yes. I think in the last few years that generally everybody is making a much bigger effort to be compliant health and safety wise, environmentally wise. There's a big our construction company works for clients, so we have requirements from obviously the HSE, the law. We have client requirements. We have our own policies and procedure requirements, but we're also ISO compliant as well, certified. So there's a lot of compliance requirements out there. And when I first started in this job, when I finished teaching probably 7 or 8 years ago, there was rumblings about it, and everybody was kind of starting to talk about it, and clients had certain amount of requirements, like, are you ISO accredited? And we were 45, 9,000, 14,000 and 27,000, but we were the only ones. We stood out in our industry, in our niche of the industry, whereas now the audits are coming in saying, well, which ISOs are you accredited to? Not are you, which ones are you? And 45,001 is the biggest one at the moment. But we're seeing a big shift now that environmental requirements and compliance is almost parallel with the health and safety. So we've had the big push on health and safety. We can't let that go. That's got to be consistent. But the environmental requirements are, almost standing parallel to the health and safety.
One of the things that has been mentioned in the chat to us and has been brought up by one or two people, let's see who did it. Certainly Damien and Neil and Jeffrey mentioned a point that John made about perhaps older skilled trades drifting away. The funny thing is that although that may be the case with the skilled trades, it wasn't what we found when we did our APS monitor, where we actually found that many of APS members had been, in fact, the majority of APS members had been in their current role with their current employer for 6 years or more. And indeed, a lot of you had actually been with the same people in the same role for over 15 years. So you can see why it is quite important that we get to the bottom of how we do the recruitment and start attracting younger people into the industry. And with that in mind, we've been asked a couple of questions about competence. And Damien has looked at it and would like your thoughts on how you demonstrate competence. What do you think about exams over maybe continuous learning? You have a lot to do, haven't you, John, with the Northumbria University, with the civil engineering course there. What are your thoughts on that, about how people learn, how they demonstrate competence?
I think the aspect of competence is a very interesting one, because you can remember in the last iteration of the CDM regs, the issue was that everybody was getting they said we're getting a bit too concerned on the competence, and now it's gone totally the other way. How to express your competence? We do it purely mainly by our experience in our jobs. I'm a chartered civil engineer. My colleague is a chartered IOSH. So we feel that covers it that way. Not too sure they overly look at that. They actually look at the jobs you've been working on, what you've done, and they turn around and say, oh, did you work on that? That's interesting. So never too bothered about what letters I've got after my name. Within the university, I think it's very interesting as to where it's all going, because what we've found is that you have to get a particularly good graduate for them to be good, and that may sound daft, but on the other hand, you can get apprentice degree people, and they are excellent. The idea of learning on the job while learning academically, I think, works very well for the industry. And I think that's a good way to show, because in the end, you then have somebody who, when they've just graduated, you're going to say to somebody, well, yeah, they've got 5-6 years experience already, as well as graduating. Then when you get a take on a graduate and somebody says, yeah, how long have they worked? Well, you know, they're in at summers and stuff like that. It's a different ball game on that side of things. Though I think that is hard for everybody to try and do that, but it's definitely the way it seems to be going. Competence is not something that we have been pointedly asked for, and we work with some very big players. It's been about, dare I say it in the end for the firm, about me. All right, it was John, yeah, I know him, they're bullseye, that's the one we'll have, and that's it. Yeah. I don't think that's necessarily correct, because I think there's lots of people out there that are really good at it and just coming out. But on the other hand, I'm not too sure in our line, on the health and safety, and particularly under a long-term understanding of design and the construction methods, that you can get that without having the long and tooth bit. I'm not too sure on how to do that. Hence the reason why we were talking before, Lesley, about getting involved with the institutes, which you're doing, which is brilliant, and saying, right, why don't we work with you so that when you do have people that are coming out and become chartered, they're interested in health and safety. They might think, do you know what, I fancy taking this a bit further. That's all you're offering, and that would be good.
Yeah, Ceri, you're the newbie in all of this, having come to the industry from a former career. What do you think about competence, especially with your teaching background?
Yes, so obviously, competencies is a way of measuring people's capabilities. So we're continuously doing that with children at school, obviously with different ways of assessment and things like that. And I think, certainly within my own company, we're often looking at where the gaps are. So you're qualified to do such and such, you've got experience to do such and such, great. Sometimes it's more obvious than others of people's capabilities and competencies, but also identify where the gaps are and how do we bridge those gaps. We do one-to-one regular checks instead of just like once a year appraisal. So we have regular KPIs. We've looked into doing 360 appraisals, but we're not there yet. So yeah, it's just about looking at the individuals, having discussions with them as well. Where do you feel confident and capable? What do you think your training or CPD needs are? Obviously, with the site workers, we've got all the mandatory health and safety ones in place: first aid, safe use of abrasive wheels, and so forth. But it's going about a little bit further than that. I'm a big advocate for further education, whatever your age, whatever your skill set, whatever your qualifications, there's always something more we can learn, whatever stage of the career we are. Yes. And some people want more promotion opportunities than others. And if you do, what do we need to do? What can you do in order to get to those goals?
Mark, with the stuff that you've been doing around the Building Safety Act and in setting up the Building Safety Alliance, you must have developed some of your own thinking around competence. Where do you think it's going? Where do you think it ought to go?
There's a whole lot of pieces to it. One is there is something in the requirement for building inspectors the word advisedly because I haven't used it correctly. They have duties in relation to duty holder and competence requirements, part 2 of the new building regs or the revised building regs. So interesting to see where that goes. How much do they push that one out? Because if they start pushing that hard, then we'll all need to demonstrate. Certainly, the world I live in has been all about working out what this looks like. A lot of the conversation yesterday was a meeting about organizational capability and what that looks like, and I think that will be more important. All of the conversations recently, and to a degree, what was said this morning is that a lot of this is delivered out through organizations. And it's organisations that need a number of different people, as John said. He's got 2 of them, chartered engineer, chartered safety practitioner, and between the 2, that provides the organisational capability to deliver a service. And I think that'll be more the norm. But there will also be, although the professional organisations. And I actually accept APS from this because APS are moving very hard on it. But although professional organisations are becoming a little bit slow to react, they will all, and they are all reacting to the challenge to make sure their members are competent. Some are doing it better than others, but ultimately the ICC Institute Competence Committee will hold professional institutes' feet to the fire, and there will be an expectation that if you give somebody an accreditation, it actually means something. I'm not sure you can make that connection with me. A chartered engineer probably. Yes. No, I won't name any others. But there are some that are a bit less rigorous.
Advanced than others. Fran, when you've been out and about, do you think clients that you've been talking to are actually seized of this issue of competence, or has it not sort of filtered down yet?
I think there's a balance. There's some that send, say when we're taking on work with people, send us an epic competency questionnaire, which when you think, when they start asking questions, I'll give you an example, what's your process for, tracking CDM risk on a project? I don't think they've actually got the competence to know whether I've written them a decent answer or not. So you kind of because
as far as asking the questions.
Yeah, you're asking me the questions because you're recycling a fairly standard competency questionnaire when I've already got relevant industry accreditation that says I'm competent. So that's another issue, isn't it, as to whether how much you pre-qual and how much you look at it in detail. But then how many is the point of employing us as CDM specialists? Is because you haven't got that knowledge. So you're then expecting to check this strange questionnaire that you don't actually know what the answers mean anyway. So I think there's a whole piece there around standardisation through the APS and other bodies as to actually giving some kind of pre-qual standardisation in a better way than we've got. I know if you go back to CDM 2007, it was like, if you've got NEBOSH construction, you're safe to do anything in the industry with the message that went out, wasn't it? Which wasn't necessarily any good either. But there's a whole piece there, I think, for the APS and us all to work together to benchmark and to map those standards better. And then I think internally as well within ourselves, we've got a peer review and a peer audit process before any documents go out. So you're almost growing and sharing knowledge internally as well at the same time to back that up. But I think there's a bit of work definitely around, it's easy enough, isn't it, to sort of send a competency questionnaire and assume because you got it back someone's competent. And, we try and map it internally to put the right people on the right jobs or to support where we're growing people and things like that. But I think industry-wide, a stamp that says these people have got relevant knowledge, skills and experience may be an easier way to go.
Well, so thank you all. We've got one last question before we break for lunch. And so remember, people, we're back at 2:00 this afternoon for those of you who are joining us for the afternoon session. But we had, as they always do in these things, we've got an Anne Family question. And it's to do with television programmes where they're doing building and renovation. There's a lot of those on the telly at the moment, and Tim thinks that perhaps they've missed the point of CDM. So I would like to know from you, what's your favourite TV building or renovation programme? And what would you like to see them do to make sure that people understand that little bit more about design risk management? The only one I've ever heard them mentioning health and safety really is in the big build. I notice that they often talk about health and safety. So let's start with Fran. What's your favourite building programme on the telly? And what would you like them to say?
I like Grand Designs. I think it links to this, sort of work we've done over the years with architects on, quite funky, different designs. The thing I would argue for, and I sit and I cringe, and probably other people watching this as well will sit and cringe, is it's not just the safety in the build, it's the safety in the maintenance and the safety in the, and I'm sitting watching it going, you're never going to be able to clean those windows. And it's almost having that, sort of like, having that holistic vision across the project that says we're creating this beautiful, funky, potentially award-winning building, but let's get the fundamentals of safety across its life cycle considered.
Okay. Mark, do you have time to watch any television programs about building?
A bit too. I love Grand Designs. Oh, what interested me, I did some. I'm a hobby joiner in my spare time, and I did a course with Axminster Tools, and they were talking about a YouTube video that they put up that they removed the guards, so that you could see what was going on, and they had a phone call from the HSE saying, you've done this is illegal, you need to sort it out. And what I don't understand, and maybe it happens, is why some of these programs don't get the similar phone calls. It's always puzzled me, because I know that Axminster were really sort of had to say, well, we've done it so that somebody can see it. I know, but it's not you're not following the rules. You're a business, that's illegal.
Okay. Ceri, have you got a favourite?
This is definitely a question for my husband. I've got to admit, I'm not a huge television watcher. I've seen little snippets accidentally as I've been coming in and out of the room when Rob's been watching them. And I have always been quite concerned about how quickly some of these buildings have flown up. I think there's one where they go and help people, families who might have a disadvantage or something's going on. And, the community comes in, which is great, community spirit. But I've always kind of thought, this extension or whatever seems to be flying up very, very quickly. Is it safe? Are these people competent? I always presume, yes, of course it is. They know what they're doing. It's on the telly. It must be fine. But it is a bit of a concern, I would have thought.
Do you think they should have more emphasis on the health and safety aspects, just to underline it to the general public?
Would that make good TV? I don't know.
Yeah, that's always a problem, isn't it?
That's it, isn't it? Are you going to keep the viewers if we are, I don't know. I mean, it would soon make the news if, God forbid, there was an accident on one of these sites, yes. On one of these programmes. And like I say, getting the community involved is brilliant. Don't get me wrong. And I'm guessing they don't do any of the dangerous stuff, hopefully. And you just assume that the people who are doing the works are qualified and competent. You just make the assumption, and hopefully, an accident will never happen. So we'll never find out.
I love police interceptors, and I'm sure other people do too. So it must be a good thing where on Grand Designs the HSE comes in and prosecutes them. That add a certain spice to it, I think.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So last word to you, John. Have you got a favourite telly programme where they're going out and building stuff?
No, unless it's Lego, I'm not really bothered.
Are you one that's into Lego Masters?
What's been mentioned is exactly right. Whenever you watch them, I hate in Grand Designs when you always say, and oh my God, what did we find in the ground? And you thought, yes, I know, that's why we do ground investigations before. So you don't actually see the realities of a construction. And I think, as was mentioned by Ceri, the realities of a construction isn't as interesting as everything just going totally wrong and mayhem occurring and then getting a nice build at the end, which costs 3 times as much as they had budgeted for. So what are they there for? They're there to entertain. If they were there to inform about the industry, then yes, they have to seriously change, and they won't do that because at the moment they're successful in simply entertaining.
So thank you very much for that. And with that, I'll draw our panel session for the morning to a close. Go and have a break, those of you who are joining us again in the afternoon. We will be back with you at 2 o'clock.